me as a 30-something-year-old healthy person needed a different approach than a 75-year-old medically affected person.
Mm-hmm.
That was what needed to be happening the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And the honesty around children aren't actually that much at risk. And do we close schools? Do we mask them? Do we vaccinate them at these very young ages? You know, even when like health markers were coming around 20-year-old boys getting myocarditis, they would still just have these mandates at colleges. And it was just a lot of that energy.
This is Other Maria, the podcast of our real-life conversations about personal evolution, society, relationships, spirituality, and everything else. We're getting vulnerable in these good faith talks and sometimes respectfully disagreeing about which of us is wrong. Just kidding, there's no right and wrong. We're just two friends sitting around talking shit. Wait, talk about deep shit, right? That's what we're doing? Yeah, enjoy.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Talk about today.
Well, I think we're going to talk about the pandemic.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I don't even know where to begin.
Let's see. Once upon a time.
Rejection.
Society collapsed in a really bizarre way.
Absolutely. Okay, fair. Never mind. Go on. Go on.
No, I don't even know what to say except that was like certainly the time when the podcast was born. Correct. The idea of it. Mm-hmm. And also largely inspired by conversations we were having about the pandemic and what felt like a unique experience that the two of us were having, but we knew it wasn't unique.
Yes.
It was just not being talked about.
Totally.
This has been a topic that we've been meaning to cover for a long time, and it just hasn't. And so here it is now.
Yeah. So here we go. Yeah, I think that both of us were noticing the censorship starting.
Mm-hmm. Very early.
Yeah. And I know for me, that was like a really, like, I like to talk about things and I like to express myself. And I felt very stifled, is what I kept saying the whole time. So I know for me, the podcast was partially that too, where it was like just a place to be able to speak freely and speak with someone that I trust and that I know understands me and I understand them. And so, yeah, it was a big reason that the podcast was born. But yeah, no, let's jump in. I think what I will say is neither of us got vaccinated.
Correct.
And wow, couldn't have imagined
being able to say that out loud.
Well, that too, but I couldn't have imagined the reaction. For me, when I chose not to get vaccinated, had no idea that was gonna be such a thing. That's right. That's what I meant.
Right. So even to like back up a little bit, I think that we both also, like, I got laid off very early into the pandemic. You had already been on a bit of a sabbatical from life because you were out in California and then came back because of the pandemic. So we both found ourselves in like late April of 2020 not having jobs as a result of the pandemic because your initial plan was to come home at your leisure and like get a restaurant job or something.
No, I was going to go back to Sushi-san.
Right.
Which like working, yeah.
wasn't a thing because restaurants had all shut down and everything. And like I said, I got laid off. They laid off my whole department. But I think we were both, and I'll save my initial reaction for a little later, but I think we were both in a fortunate space to be able to just kind of sit back and watch things.
Definitely.
Because we weren't otherwise occupied. Like a lot of people, their job just shifted to remote. So they were still working 9 to 5. And we both were able to kind of just watch things unfold and maybe pay more close attention or maybe had the opportunity to get information and pay attention to our own reactions and our intuition about things more so than other people. Mm-hmm. So I know that earlier on, even before the vaccinations became a thing, because that was in
2021.
Right, like not till January of 2021.
Right.
I remember when they were making announcements recommending it. It was in
Right.
February. I can tell you exactly where I was. But
Me
like
too.
even before that point, we already were seeing things. And like I actually just want to like make a blanket statement here that I have been so far removed from the news and any of that old information for years now.
Yeah.
Because as we'll get to later, just the inundation of news and media and all of the messaging and everyone's feelings and everything got to be so much for me that in September of 2021, I just like shut off everything. The news, social media, I have not looked back.
Yeah.
So my memory of specific details has really faded. So I will do my best to put myself back there and to remember the details, but I'm going to probably have to like lean on you quite a bit. I just know that
Because I haven't forgotten a moment. No,
I know you haven't. No, but I just wanted to say that like even before the vaccinations, we already were noticing things that didn't feel in alignment with us or felt inconsistent, and we're talking about it a lot with each other. And one of the big things I think was, at least for me, I just had this sense of like not really knowing what was going on, but having a gut feeling that something was off, and very clearly watching most people react in fear. And I did for a period of time, of course, because the beginning of it was really scary. All of the things that we were accustomed to were ripped away very quickly, and there was a narrative of fear. So, of course, that was part of my experience, but I do feel like you and I came out of at least operating from that place pretty quickly, and we're just sitting back and watching and noticing things and watching other people continue to behave from fear. And then the whole vaccine.
I'm just remembering right now that you had really strong feelings about like the lockdown portion far before the vaccine. You were very, when I say freaked out, I don't mean you were scared for yourself. You were like freaked out by the concept of it.
And I have never in my life, up until that point or after, had an intuitive hit like I did that day when they announced. And it wasn't even that they announced lockdowns. It was before this when they started to make, I think they were maybe mandates already,
Yeah.
or something, but we hadn't even gotten to lockdown.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing maybe on the radio that everyone was supposed to stay home and not gather in groups. And it was one other point, but I just remember like this like rush inside of me, and it was calm. It was calm and it was clear, but it was fucking loud. And my experience with my intuition and my inner knowing is that it's usually like pretty quiet. This one was loud. It was like, nope, something is very wrong. Something is very wrong. And it was undeniable. And I couldn't tell you what it was, and I still probably can't specifically tell you what it was, but I just knew something about this is very wrong.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I didn't necessarily feel that. No, I didn't feel that because I remember watching your reaction and being like, wow, she's having a very strong reaction to this. Why am I not? And I think in retrospect, it's really useful that I had that experience because I do understand why everyone was following these rules and guidelines. And as much as I started to come onto the same page as you, I remember it feeling like, well, yeah, why wouldn't we maybe all stay away from one another for a small period of time? Well, also because in the beginning it was supposed to be a small period of time.
Hashtag flatten the curve.
Hashtag 2 weeks. And
shove it up your ass.
But like, you know,
respectfully.
But like,
I want to ruin your perfect butthole.
Well, that's an inside joke they're not gonna get. Oh my god. But like, yeah, I just remember feeling like we have to try things. Yeah, wouldn't you want to like be distancing and trying to not spread it. Doesn't that seem logical? But like if we don't see each other or just take some time for distance and to just be home, etc. But I think where my naivete was coming in was that I was enjoying being home.
Sure.
Like for context, my sister had passed away August of 2019, and that's why I'd gone away. So I had already been in this personal experience of needing space and time. So, like, of course, when I came back, I remember I was in California, like you said, and everyone in Chicago was like, don't come back. It's hell here. It's terrible here. It's awful. Do not come back. And I was like, okay, interesting. But like, I do want to come back because I want my community and I like want to go through it with you guys. And I was also having a really interesting experience where I was because I was essentially working on a farm, we'll say. And I was with this couple that's in their mid 70s. And we were on 40 acres of gorgeous land that was theirs. And we had everything we needed. It was us three and another girl. And actually another couple that like had to get back to Sweden the first week as they were getting rid of all these flights, and they were like, we were trying to get them home. But then it ended up being me and the couple and the younger girl. And like, I want to be very clear that I know both of us have so much compassion for all the fear. It's not like there was no reason to be scared. It's not like, what? Just surrender and chill. We do not feel that way.
Correct.
But even that early, watching that couple, they literally didn't have Wi-Fi. They had two computers, one for each of them. And I arrived March 1st. So literally every single first day I was there, COVID was unfolding in real time as I arrived. So I wasn't with them much before COVID, but even just that first week versus the second week versus the third week versus the fourth week I was there, I just watched as they were constantly going on their computers, constantly reading the news, and very scared. And I understand that. And we were truly one of the safest places you could be. We literally had our own 40 acres, nobody around.
We were all in good health.
All in good health. And of course, they were scared because they're older. And the woman has like a respiratory issue. Absolutely. But it was like all the messaging, we were literally like leaving the mail outside for 72 hours before bringing it in. Me and the girl went to go grocery shopping, and when we came back, we washed all of it, outside. And that's what we were all being told to do. So like, of course, there was still always this threat for them. There was this idea of a threat that it could still like be brought to the house. But anyway, it was just so interesting to watch them not be able to find any sort of peace because it was this imminent threat, even though they were in this place. So like, to me, that was really striking right away. And then when I got home, it was just interesting. The fear was just really, really interesting. Again, not to negate any of the fear. I was scared too.
Well, right. This conversation is overall more about our experience in the pandemic. This is not about the COVID virus and the actual threat
Totally.
it presented, which I will acknowledge personally, there was a legitimate threat.
Absolutely.
For a great many people.
1000%.
And the narrative around fear created a really disproportionate mode of handling it in the world, in this country, in certain places, which caused us to have a jarring experience that is less talked about than the mainstream narrative.
Absolutely. Well said. And I understood why people were so scared when I got back, because the messaging was so much of like, don't even go outside. Like, I remember that whole summer, I would go for runs.
With a mask on?
Well, not with a mask on, because I absolutely wasn't coming in contact with anybody. And we were all doing that thing of just like, you see someone coming down the street, you cross the street. But
Right.
I
Dive
lived
into
in
traffic.
But like, I lived in a neighborhood where you could easily do that. I wasn't crossing paths with anybody. And I was just shocked at even the backyards. Like, nobody was outside. And it was just really jarring and interesting and like a very unique experience. And I also was watching my friends be really scared about their jobs, even though we were all making this unemployment money that was like insanely large amounts. It was still like, what am I going to do if I can't work? Which I was really angry at from the start because I felt like it was so unfair to put that on the populace of like, that's what we're worrying, like, but I got to figure out when I'm going to be able to work again. But you also are being told to stay home.
Oh, yeah, that conflict of messaging was so baffling.
Yeah.
It was like, don't leave your house and also go make money and be in the workforce. And why don't you have a job? And it was like, what job? Like, where jobs? And also, you don't want me to leave.
Right. Man, what a crazy time.
And then, I mean, I also want to acknowledge, and I don't really remember the details, but just the difference in the way different classes were expected to handle it.
1,000%.
Like different economic classes.
1,000%.
The middle, upper, and upper class. Well, I suspect, or I vaguely remember that the upper class was still able to do whatever they wanted. I think, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe, but they certainly had large homes to be.
Right, and a lot more resources.
A lot more resources.
And then the middle class was like, quarantine, stay in your home, watch everything, be afraid. But the lower class, I mean, and I don't even know if I'm saying this politically correctly or whatever, but like the lower economic classes were expected to be the ones bringing the middle class all their shit.
Correct.
So they were expected to still be working and everything.
And then they were called the essential workers. And the essential workers were really the lower classes.
Yeah.
Exactly right. They're going to bring us our groceries. They're going to bring us our food. They're going to be at the factories working with one another and bringing it home.
They're still going to be driving the trucks and working the drive-thrus and...
Right. And like our friend Ed talks about it a lot, that she lived in Little Village at the time. And it was all these other narratives going around about like, stay home or how dare you go out, one or the other, like, just lots of like shame and blame and anger and these things. But then she's watching her entire neighborhood be essential workers and like not being even allowed to stay home if they wanted to. If that is what felt safest, they're not allowed to do that.
Sure.
They still had to go to work because they were called essential workers.
Right.
And now they're getting sick. And
then blamed for having been out when, I even forgot about that fucking term, essential workers. That was like all the class you're talking about, and then like medical professionals.
And medical professionals, absolutely. So yeah, it was just so interesting in retrospect and like watching it all unfold. And then the vaccine happened. Do you remember when you decided you weren't going to get vaccinated?
Probably. I mean, I don't remember a specific point in time, but I do remember where I was when I saw like an announcement, I think, on CNN, because I was still watching the news at the time, or just one of those stations, whatever it was. But I remember them like announcing the vaccine and whichever one was first, and them giving the stats on it and the expectations and what it was supposed to do. And it was like, whatever percentage effective at preventing the illness. And it wasn't very high. And I remember seeing it and just being like, yeah, I don't. Because I also was so aware at that point in time, it had been like 9 months since we'd been like locked down. And I was just like, I'm not personally in danger. If I get this, I'm be fine. I know that. And also knowing how quickly they rushed this vaccine, it was like...
But Maria, they've been studying mRNA vaccines for 10 years.
They can suck it. Okay. No, but just like... Just being very clear that for myself, I was not enough at risk of contracting this illness in the first place, having a bad reaction, or passing it along or whatever. I was not enough at risk to feel comfortable with the risk of such a new thing that also just wasn't effective enough for me to feel like
the risk, the cost, risk, benefit,
right.
Whatever. Yeah.
That's fine. And also, I know that I, for myself, am very good at, I don't feel well. I don't have to be like sick or throwing up or whatever. I don't feel well, I'm going to rest today. I'm not going to come into contact with people.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I operate anyway. So I wasn't in a position where it was like I would still have to go out because I still didn't have a job. So it wasn't like if I got sick, I was then going to be reckless about being out in the world or anything like that. It was just like, okay, if I get sick, I'm chill. I'll stay home.
Right.
I'll do your little tests.
Sure.
Do you remember for you?
Yeah, I think you and I had already been talking about it. I mean to say, like, my, like, wheels were turning on it because my mom is in her late 70s, and the messaging when the vaccine was coming out as well. So I was seeing the same stuff you were saying about the effectiveness, what it was trying to aim at. And it was kind of back and forth a lot in the beginning of just, is it to actually prevent getting it? Or is it preventing hospitalizations and severe illness? And I had always, from what I was seeing, was that it was mainly to prevent hospitalizations and severe illness, not to prevent getting the disease, which that messaging got wonky too. But there was also that giant messaging of, you're going to kill your grandma if you don't get it. You're getting it for the community. We're going for herd immunity. You're part of that solution. And if you don't get it, then you're going to be like dangerous. And my mom was going to be in the first wave of getting them.
Which, like, just to be clear, that already doesn't make sense.
I mean, I know. But what was so interesting was, like, people thought it did. A lot of people.
Almost everyone that we were exposed to and all the narratives that we were seeing, it was making sense to them that if you get vaccinated and I don't, I'm somehow going to harm you with the thing that you've been vaccinated against.
Yep. And also, like, herd immunity will be the answer to ending the pandemic. And if you don't get vaccinated, you won't be part of that herd immunity. And so you're the reason that this is still going on longer than I was.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh my God,
this is a trip down memory lane for me. Yeah. I've forgotten all this terminology.
Yeah.
Great. Herd immunity.
Herd immunity. Which theoretically, of course, I understand. And then it became, if you were going to talk about it or question it or any of it, you don't care about science. And to this day, there's all these signs up being like,
and you're trying
the science
to kill grandma.
And you're trying to kill grandma, and you don't care about your community, you know. Like,
and you're selfish.
Yeah.
And
so my mom was going to be getting it in, like, you know, that first wave. So, like, you know, I think it was announced in January. It was mostly like healthcare workers at first and like really, really at risk communities. And then anyway, like January through April was when like all the older people were getting it. And so I took my mom to get hers. And I remember when it first came out, just my intuitive hit was the same as yours of like, without any other voices yet, without any other feeling shame from anybody or anything else, being able to just like take in the information that this is becoming available and like where has it come from, how was it created, the timeline, the emergency use authorization,
your own personal risk,
my own personal risk. I was like, I'm sensing I'm not going to need that. I'm going to be okay and I'm going to be healthy. I don't think I'm going to need the vaccine. I just felt that, but it wasn't like some strong like political belief. It was just like, I don't think I'm going to need that. And then, yeah.
Right, quick.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that.
Right.
I forgot about the whole... I can't believe how much I've forgotten.
Me either. No, it's kind of fun. I love it. I know. It's just funny.
In no way was this ever political for me.
No, of course not. I mean, like, it wasn't until they made it.
But then it became political.
No, exactly. Even saying that.
It was viewed as political. I completely forgot about that angle because it's like, how the fuck would that be political? And then it's like, oh, yeah, but well, it wasn't for me.
Right.
But the narrative made it as that way.
Yes. Truly, when it was first coming out, it was only about health, safety, community, risk. That's all I ever was thinking about. I wasn't like, what political stance can I show by getting vaccinated?
I love Trump.
Yeah, so. I love Trump so much.
Fuck the vaccine and fuck grandma.
Yeah, exactly. Trump is my god, so I'm not going to get vaccinated. Like, what? Never was about that. But long story short, I was already toying around with not getting vaccinated. I decided I didn't want to, but it was like, the energy was there now. Everyone was frantically going to get vaccinated. None of it felt right to me because once they started the vaccines and we were doing this rollout of like going by your last name or like age group, whatever it was that they were saying was like how you're supposed to get it, all of these people that were working in clinics, I was hearing it everywhere, but I had my own personal experience with it. My friend's sister, who worked at a clinic, at the end of the day, they had all these vaccines that were going to go bad from like being out of the fridge or whatever it was. And so all these vaccines at the end of the day were just going to get thrown away. So all the workers at every clinic were calling anyone they knew, being like, get down here now. We've got 30 more minutes before we close. And they were just like giving vaccines to people. That also struck me as like, what the fuck? Like, if this is supposed to be like a well-oiled governmental machine that's giving us services and
save
helping
everyone's
us
life
save everyone's
and the
life,
pandemic.
how is it up to like a rando nurse? And why are we throwing away these like vital vaccines? And it's now up to like rando nurse to be like, shit, I gotta call my closest 10 friends and try to get them down here right now and get vaccinated. It was like so interesting. So I kept getting these random offers of like, come down right now, come down right now. You know, it'd be like a 40-minute drive and it was like, come down right now. Like I'd get a text at 3 and it's like, we're open until 3:30, come now and get it. And I'd be like, oh, thank you so much. I'm actually busy. Like, because I realized already I can't just say, oh, I'm not getting vaccinated, so you don't have to keep asking. I already knew I wasn't allowed to say that because it was going to be backlash.
Right.
So I was already in that energy in April, and then I got COVID in May. And I was very sick. I got it pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like I was, but it was just like a very, very, very bad flu with incredibly strange symptoms, you know? Very unnatural, weird as fuck symptoms. So I was very sick for a couple of weeks, and then I was okay. And then certainly at that point, I'd already been doing my own research, trying to learn, because like, I'm not just saying this because I feel like I need to say it. I just like, I've always been a science nerd.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, I've always been super into science. So I was like interested in learning about like viruses and how they work. And
I think that that's actually why, because I feel the same.
Totally. We were doing a ton of our own research.
Here's the thing that's crazy about the trust the science thing. It was that you and I were both so interested in the science that when we spotted something that didn't make sense, also because we didn't have much else going on in our lives,
Totally.
cross-referenced the shit out of it. And we went
100%.
digging and we looked for other resources and we found other,
voices and opinions, sources of information. Yeah.
We did a ton of that to complete the circle as much as we possibly could. And then at that point, the mainstream narrative to me was like making less and less sense, because it was like, you're saying trust the science and you're presenting 7% of the science
right
within that argument. And that happened over a course of like, I think we were both doing that the entire time. And that's mostly what we were talking about, even prior to the vaccine. But like once the vaccine started happening too, sort of watching people's response, watching the, oh man, what was that fucking term? Virtue signaling. Watching the virtue signaling of people having gotten the vaccine and watching the ramp up of it being touted as the right thing to do the right thing, and sort of being advertised almost before there were actual advertisements, that hit me weird. And then all the information that we had been harvesting from many different places, which included mainstream media at the time, all of that for me was just more and more reinforcement that certainly for me, I did not want to get the vaccine.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to.
Sure.
And then as you were saying, it became clear very quickly that to the general population, at least in Chicago, the people we were interacting with, that was not received well.
No.
And in the meantime, there's new restrictions, mandates, stuff like that happening around public spaces and gatherings, and even private ones. Everyone's asking, please only come if you're vaccinated. If you don't have a vaccine yet, you can't come to this place, blah, blah, blah. And
you can't come to this support group, health thing, something for your own mental health, too.
That stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, when it got really icky, because it was I wasn't going to lie to anyone. And then there was the whole thing about fake vaccine cards. I'm not going to do that either. I am good with my decision. but also for me to offer that to you or like engage in a conversation is kind of putting myself in harm's way at that point for a lot of shame and judgment and being ostracized and quite honestly a lot of the time treated like I was stupid or a bigot or selfish, reckless. Very, very, very rarely, I can probably count on one hand the number of times that I was responded to with curiosity, and that was short lived.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, because I mean, to go back to what we were saying about like, it's great that you've really let it go in like the best way. Or like just the fact that you don't even like remember some of this stuff. I'm like, that's hilarious, which is no judgment. I'm saying it's genuinely hilarious to me because we were like down those COVID rabbit holes during COVID.
We sure
We were
were.
both so worked up about it and like obsessively researching and learning and reading and listening to people and then talking about it and on and on and on. But I also was just like science wise, what was so frustrating, and I bring this up because of why I didn't get vaccinated, science wise, natural immunity suddenly became
Not a thing.
not a thing at all in America, not a thing at all, a conspiracy theory,
Oh
a,
my God, I forgot about that.
it was literally like a conspiracy theory. It was like a,
And this is when the censorship comes back
yeah,
in.
mis and disinformation.
Right, because didn't that hashtag natural immunity get banned on a bunch of platforms?
Got it. No, I think it did.
Yeah.
100%. So my last point of why I didn't get vaccinated was that I got COVID. Then I got it and I was like, well, I certainly have some sort of natural immunity. That's hard to parse out because A, no scientist could tell us how long it's going to last. But saying there's no natural immunity is just got to be categorically wrong because all viruses, that's how our bodies work. We create some sort of immunity because our cells remember the virus. And that's just how all viruses work. And I remember very early, right around when I got sick, I was talking to my friend that lived in Germany, who's from Germany. And he was able to much more freely just say like, yeah, I'm still thinking about if I'm going to get vaccinated. I don't think I'm going to, but like I might. I mean, I don't want to speak for all of Europe and every country. They're all different. Everything is different. I'm sure there was also shame and blame going on there. But just this one example, he told me that so freely, but separately, this was when we were starting these like vaccine passport things and like having to have this vaccine card to prove you're vaccinated. And he told me at that time that there was some restrictions, say like to travel. And he was like, in order to travel right now, you can have a vaccine card or a natural immunity card that says you've had it in the last 6 months. And I was like, LOL. Germany, a country that I respect for their way of organization and like whatever. But like Germany has this system that they're actually acknowledging people with natural immunity. And we're not only not acknowledging it, we're making it this weird, dirty word as though it's made up conspiracy. I remember that. Okay. You could say pause.
We can pause. And we're back. I had to be a child about finishing my beverage.
Sneakily trying to do it. It's like, girl, be
It
loud.
can't be stopped.
You can't be loud. You can't not be loud. But yeah, that was the big one too, where I was like, this is so wild. Like, what is going on that I'm not allowed to talk to people about this? And then the biggest thing was my family. Like, my mom was very concerned that I wasn't getting vaccinated, but was also, bless her heart, all love. It's okay. I absolutely understand she was scared for good reason. But she, as you know, like one of the famous phrases she said to me was, don't you care about your community? And it was just like a fucking like knife to the heart. Because it was like, I'm someone who particularly cares about my community.
Very openly and very much so for your entire life.
Yeah. And so it was like suddenly I was being looked at as this harmful alien that was like.
Yeah. And I remember that being one of the most hurtful parts of the whole thing, which was that people that were very close to us, that held us in high regard, in confidence, respected our thoughts and feelings, and oftentimes people that were accustomed to coming to us for guidance, rather than, again, approaching with curiosity and saying, here's everything I'm being told, and here's this person I really trust, and what they're saying is in conflict with what I've been told. So let me try to learn about what they understand because I trust them and see what I can learn. Rather than that, people often approached us with, this is what I've been told, and you're speaking wackadoodle, and I can't believe that I was wrong about you. I didn't know that you are wackadoodle. I can't talk to you anymore.
Yep.
Until you're not wackadoodle.
Mm-hmm. Correct. It was wild.
Mm-hmm.
It was so wild. Yeah, and it was just watching the messaging happen, and I'm sort of thinking about it currently. I do also feel like it's necessary right now. I think people are still healing from all of it, but there is like certainly amnesia that you and I kind of foresaw coming.
We sure did.
Mm-hmm. Like I remember I said to a friend who was very concerned during the pandemic that I wasn't vaccinated, and to her credit, did a really good job of not icing me out and of sort of putting it to the side so that she could still have a relationship with me. And I remember like 2 years later, we were working together and she and I actually were able to have a really good conversation about it that was further along than it could have ever been during the pandemic. And she was much more open. And I brought up how Biden had said categorically, and I can pull up the video of him saying, if you get vaccinated, you won't get this disease. And she genuinely was like, yeah, I don't remember that. And it was just like, what? Like, yeah, it's like so interesting.
And I do remember that it wasn't just Biden. I remember there were several other instances of that same message.
Certainly.
But yes, oh my God, we could do 7-part episode on this, but
totally.
Yeah, the amnesia, which we absolutely did unfortunately see coming, was just so many things that were presented in the mainstream narrative were suddenly wiped from the record.
Right.
And
the sort of this attitude like, oh, I always knew that the vaccine wasn't going to stop me from getting COVID. I always knew that. They were very clear about that. And it's like, but they were at points. They weren't at others. And those same people that are saying to me now, like, oh, I was very clear. No, you weren't. Like, I was there with you. I was talking to you. I was experiencing it with you. And I was listening to what you were saying. And that was why when the vaccines first came out, people were so excited to get them because they thought it would just end it right there and then they wouldn't get sick and they could go back out in the world because if they didn't have the vaccine,
and everything would go back to normal.
And everything would go back to normal.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point too, because oh fuck, I just lost it.
But yeah, and like the whole narrative, just to remind you, because this is fun, but I also want to like, while we're here, I just want to bring these things up. The pandemic of the unvaccinated. Remember that phrase? She slowly melts away.
I would melt farther, but I need a longer cord.
Yeah. The pandemic of the unvaccinated. It was just such loud messaging that
was very clearly aimed at pitting people against each other.
1,000 million
what.
trillion
in whatever way possible.
Yeah.
Whether it be from a political angle or one that you're like selfish, you don't give a shit about your community, or
you're an anti-vaxxer. Of course, let's not forget the classic. Old classic. You're an anti-vaxxer, you don't believe in vaccines, you know, you're
wearing a tinfoil hat.
Yeah, right.
You believe the earth is flat.
Yeah.
All of it. Yeah. That's you.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to get this one vaccine that you yourself don't need. And that was another thing that was very clear to me too. It was like, I cannot wrap my head around why I would make a medical decision for my body for someone else.
Totally. And that's why I think vaccines in general are really tricky. And we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but I just do want to mention, I think there's good research for anyone listening to do on, like, for instance, like the measles vaccine, things like that. It's that we
Absolutely,
have,
those are different kinds.
no, for sure. But even the different kinds that did change our
Collective immunity.
I even think there's some research to do around, did it as much as we think?
Absolutely.
Has it been messaged to us for our entire lives? Like, we don't even know the vaccines we've gotten in our lives. We don't remember the ones we've gotten the minute we pop out of the womb. And we've just learned to never, ever, ever, ever question it.
Right.
And to not learn about the science behind how our actual bodies work. Mm-hmm. And how they work in tandem with viruses. And this is not saying we shouldn't have any vaccines. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just think that there's been so much messaging for generations that cut off our curiosity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I actually remembered what I was going to say when you were saying, like, I was there with you. Shit was unclear. Since the pandemic, put it off for a little while, but I sat down and fucking worked through all my resentments about this.
Right.
And the main one that came out was that I watched myself throughout all of this be aware of myself and be I watched myself watch myself, but like I watched myself be very aware of and try not to act on my fear. I watched myself be very open and curious. And my biggest resentment was that it was unfair that other people weren't also doing that. Because what it really came down to for me, and I think that you'll agree with this, was just that I don't know the answer. I don't know what's going on. It also seems that the people telling us what to do don't know the answer and don't know what's going on. So all I'm saying is, can we all talk about this and stop acting like we know the problem, we know the solution, we know the fucking science? Because we don't. And what might be helpful is if we could talk about it. And I was open to that, and a lot of people just weren't. And I am fine with that now, and I get it, and I love everyone for having made it through the way they did.
Totally.
And I have no hard feelings anymore, but that's what it was at the root for me. I was like, I just want you to be as open as I'm being right now. Mm-hmm. And people weren't able to. Mm-hmm. And I got really resentful that I was like, I just want to be able to talk to you without you shutting me down. Because even the people that often would approach me with maybe a little bit of curiosity or willing to have a conversation, very, very, very few of them did so with an actual open mind. Sure. Of like, let's see what we can learn from each other. It was like, I will have a conversation with you to try to change your mind.
1,000%. Remember the New York Times text bot?
I don't. Remind me.
New York Times came out with a newfangled technology they were trying to show off where they did a text bot where it showed...
I remember this. How to have a conversation with your unvaccinated friend.
To try to get them to get vaccinated.
Right.
And it was coming through this, like, false fucking
bullshit. Oh, that was terrifying. That was so terrifying and closed off.
Lens of, like, have compassion for the poor idiots. Let's try to figure out the best language for us to approach this difficult conversation to get them to do the right thing. And I was like, this is the most fucking condescending thing I've ever seen in my entire fucking life. And if anyone tries to fucking text me this shit or talk to me, like I'm a fucking idiot.
You know, and I literally did have interactions like that where people would say, maybe if you had better information, you'd make a different decision.
1,000%.
And
1,000%. And
okay,
I will also say this. One of the thousands of things that frustrated me. What really frustrated me was that because there was no curiosity and openness, and because in Chicago, let's also remember we're in a very like particular lens of that, it became political, and then it was politically driven in Chicago by like, if you're a Trump supporting anti-vaxxer, you're killing all of us. And
first of all, how are you even surviving within the city limits? How have you not already
burned
at the stakes?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're not like a Biden loving Democrat who believes in science, then
And is wearing an "I got vaccinated today" sticker. A fresh one, a new one. Get it every day.
right, like then you're a fucking terrible person.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that messaging, it actually pushed people that I believe could have benefited from the vaccine from getting vaccinated. That's what I believe.
Say more?
Because I think there were people in some communities, well, I had family members. I had 2 family members that were much older that both ended up dying of COVID and they didn't get vaccinated. And I have a feeling that some of the reasons they didn't get vaccinated were more on some of the conspiracy sides of like, if you get the vaccine, you're going to have a chip installed in you. If you get the vaccine, you know, the government's going to track you. Right. And I mean,
all my reasons went out the window.
And like for me, it was always balanced of like, I'm not saying I will definitely be injured by this vaccine. I'm just trying to do the risk benefit cost some, no, I'm just kidding. Whatever, you know, but
cost benefit analysis for yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm trying to do the cost benefit analysis for myself, trying to block out the noise of if you don't do this, you don't like your community. Working against that or like working with that energy, trying to still listen to what do I think is best for me. And I think if you were over 75, why not? I remember us talking about this during the pandemic too, because it was like, you got 20 years in you. If like if the vaccine does something to you.
Right.
And mind you, vaccine injury is real. And now the mainstream media is starting to talk about it. You do not know this. They are. They're starting to talk more about it. Not in weird ways, but they are.
I didn't know mainstream was adopting conspiracy theories.
But
I worked through all this, I swear to God, but I get to still be snarky about it.
1,000%, you know? And I mean, exactly. But like, I think that having it be so polarized didn't let people think about it in a rational way.
Of course.
So then like go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, every way that it was presented, whether it was intended or not, I don't want to go there today, but had the effect of robbing everyone of sane, rational, level-headed, emotionally balanced, autonomous thought.
Right. Absolutely. And so I want to acknowledge that because to me, it's important. I noticed it. I saw it. I was like, I'm actually thinking some people that could have gotten vaccinated, that maybe it would have saved their life, didn't, because we weren't allowed to have more balanced conversations about it.
It's a wonderful point.
And like listening to the doctors that I really found, Vinay Prasad, if anybody wants to look up Vinay Prasad, I fucking love him.
He's a great one.
He's so fucking wonderful.
He wasn't actually one of my favorites, but you, again, because you give so many shits about your community, were really motivated by like finding someone that you built trust with and their presentation and the maximum accessibility of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why he does stick out, quite honestly.
Absolutely. And it was really fun that I found him as early as I did. And actually also Zubin Damania, who annoyingly calls himself Z-Dog. Remember? Z-D-O-G-G.
Oh my God, with 2 G's. Bless his heart.
Oh, Z-Dog. He's funny. He's also a doctor. So they're both doctors, right? Like
paging Dr. Z-Dog.
Yeah. No, he's such an interesting character.
I
love him so much. But it was funny. I found them separately. And then I found out later they had a podcast together. And I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Why I liked them was that they were both medical professionals. I'm not a scientist or a doctor. I get it.
I am.
Oh my God, amazing. But I could tell they were incredibly intelligent and incredibly well-studied, especially Vinay Prasad. He's like one of those encyclopedic mind nerds, and he's an oncologist and something else. And he writes papers for journals consistently. And why I loved finding both of them and then following them for several years up till today, they were both super advocates of the vaccine. I think they still are, honestly. But they were both bringing my attention, like the policy making, because they're real fucking tried and true scientists, of understanding that like there's no one right fit to any specific person. And that's what's like where Western medicine's failing these days, because they try to do like a one size fits all, but you really need to understand who the person is in front of you. And so they were able to come with it with more balance. And then as things went on, started to really call out like, fuck the CDC and the FDA. They're not doing their jobs properly. And here is why, X, Y, and Z. And now the population's losing faith in these institutions. And that's fucking dangerous. And that sucks. I know it's part of the process. We need to lose faith because they're not doing their jobs. But I know what they meant as like true like medicine loving scientists. They're like, the CDC is supposed to be like our fucking end all be all that's doing all the research now. The NIH, NIAID, like they're supposed to be on our side researching all this stuff medically
They
to
weren't?
keep us safe.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, totally.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because I just want to make this other point when I was talking about like us having found resources and voices to
Absolutely.
talk about. I believe this is the case with both Vinay Prasad and paging Dr. Zevog. I can't stop. That's amazing. I believe this is the case with them, but I will say it's absolutely the case with everyone else that I felt I could trust over time, is that they would have a discussion and be making a point, and then a week or two later there would be new developments.
Absolutely.
And they were so upfront about saying, I was wrong about the point I made before. I've received new information and therefore have formed a different opinion. And they were so upfront and clear
1000%.
with that.
And the other direction, where they would be like trying to believe in our institutions, understanding that we didn't know in the first 6-8 months what the fuck was going on. No one knew. And so these institutions and Anthony Fauci were trying these things on, like school closures, lockdowns, masks, vaccines. They were trying things on for size. But then as the months would go on, and they would say like, I'm having a feeling that maybe that's not right, but you know what, we got to try it. Let's see what's going on.
Right, the willingness.
Yes, we're in good faith. We're like trusting our leaders right now. And then as time went on, them being like, no, I had a fucking feeling, and that was so fucking dumb. And how are we still doing that? And here's now the science behind it. Or let's show how they didn't do real science. They never spent their billions of dollars to do randomized control trials, which is Vinay Prasad's double-blind randomized control trials. Is Vinay Prasad's like fetish?
Him and a lot of, well, okay, not fetish, but like a lot of other people are really on board with that for good reason.
Yeah,
makes sense.
But he's to this day, you watch his videos right now, and he's like, here's why they were wrong. Here's why it's crazy they went as long as they did. And they never ran trials, and we're just telling us this is what we need to do. And that messaging of like they were as in the dark as we were and they just needed to try, but they worked for the first like 6-8 months.
Right. And I was going to say, because beyond that, they were in the dark because they chose it.
Yeah, because they were just like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And it was the policy making. Anyway, I went on a really roundabout thing, but just to tie that together, it was about my relatives who didn't get vaccinated. Me as a 30-something-year-old healthy person needed a different approach than a 75-year-old medically affected person. That was what needed to be happening the whole time. And the honesty around children aren't actually that much at risk. And do we close schools? Do we mask them? Do we vaccinate them at these very young ages? Like, you know, even when like health markers were coming around 20-year-old boys getting myocarditis, they would still just have these mandates at colleges. And it was just a lot of that energy. And the mandates. I mean, and the closing of the businesses like really upset me. It was like so shockingly illogical that like I would see like a storefront that had like gone out of business because of the pandemic, but was just sitting empty because also businesses weren't open. And so it was like, how come everyone's not just closed, not having to pay rent? And everybody, and I know when I talk, people are like, oh, but you can't do that. Oh, but here's X, Y, and Z. Oh, but this, that, and the other. I got it. But it's like, no, that's what government, I think, I just read this the other day and I was like, oh, right. Where it was like when the shift happened from government being, oh, it's Abraham Hicks. I was reading The Vortex, And Jerry's asking her what our best government should look like, right? And of course she's
I've read that.
You've read it.
It was in one of the books.
And of course, yeah, it's in the Vortex. I'm saying the book. No, not in the actual.
Oh, so no. Shut the fuck up. No, I thought you meant the cards.
No.
Yes, it's in the Vortex. I remember that part. Yeah, go ahead.
And she said, it doesn't really matter what she was talking about. It was just the line of like when it's in the actual Vortex. No, but like
that too, though. Now
that too, but like that the government has become about controlling us versus offering us services. And I had like forgotten what the good of government can be. Like truly.
No, I know.
I was like, what?
We all have. Everyone hates the government.
Yeah, it's like fuck off. But it's
and
like,
it shouldn't be that way.
Right, and that's why my mom and I have such like a whatever, because I think she still has that understanding that that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be offering us services.
Mm-hmm.
But where she and I get in conflict is that she's still trying to
claim that happens.
Yeah, or just cling to the idea that that's what we're still working towards or for, or that that's like a thing. And it's like, totally, I want that to be. But anything right now in this system is all about controlling us and not about providing us services. And that's what the pandemic felt like. And I was like, right, they're supposed to be like providing us services. Like the government should be going like, you know, whatever needs to happen for this, your business is just going to be closed for 2 years. And then it's going to the fuck open because that building's just going to be sitting empty. Why the fuck would a new business move in after the pandemic? Why the fuck did you get punished for the pandemic happening? Why did people get punished for it? I'm very mad. I'm still mad.
Yeah, girl.
Because there's still repercussions. And it's still, 400 new billionaires through COVID. 8 million new people in poverty through COVID.
I'm glad you know that.
Yeah. And, Sweden didn't close its schools, and they did very, very well.
And that brings up another point of frustration at the time, particularly at the inception of vaccines and other methods of treatment that had been tried up until that point in time, and actual real research and double-blind studies that were being done in other parts of the world that were having great success with different, in some cases, different medications, in other cases, just different ways of managing the population, and that was censored here.
Yeah. 100%. The censorship was bananas.
I just want to talk about it.
Why are you so scared of me?
I am not claiming I'm right.
No.
Or that I know.
No.
But I also know that you don't know.
Right.
And that's all I want to talk about.
No, the censorship was why. And that's the other thing that I feel like my friends, some of the people in my life didn't want to talk about or acknowledge. And also certainly the generational divide was really hard for me between me and my elders because they aren't on social media. And I understand that social media can seem like this silly, goofy, fun place to be or whatever, but honestly, it's also become a town square. It's become a place that like a lot of people interact with each other and get their information. Mm-hmm. So it mattered that was where censorship was happening.
Absolutely.
And so we all got told to stay home. Facebook and Instagram. Facebook bought Instagram. Meta blew up, became Meta, got us so addicted on our phones in these social media circles, and then censored. And so you literally couldn't write the word vaccine. Like people were writing like V at CC, like writing different words for the vaccine, writing the jab, hashtag natural immunity became a joke. Like censorship literally happened. People's accounts got deleted
all the time
and lost all their followers, which was a big deal.
Yeah, people lost followers. Then this whole thing about self-censorship came in because if you had a platform of any kind and you simply wanted to say a word about current events, you were risking your livelihood.
100,000%.
And that happened to many people.
Many, many, many people. But what was so frustrating was that all the liberals were suddenly fine with it because it was mis and disinformation. And now we have this new catchphrase that makes censorship okay. Mm-hmm.
Oof. Okay.
Where it was like, that's where my resentment lies to this day, because it's like I grew up in a home that touted itself as political and liberal and proud of that. And like my dad was a lawyer, my mom was a teacher. They were super politically active. They were like blue through and through, you know, and like.
And can you say your dad's specialty?
Death penalty defense attorney.
Right.
So he defended men on death row.
Right.
And didn't believe in the death penalty, whether or not you were guilty.
And it was very much about
compassion,
love and compassion, and like hearing someone out, I feel like, too.
1,000,000,000%. And that's why it was always hard having it just be me and my mom. Like, my dad wasn't around for this, and I don't know how he would have handled it. I don't want to do like this rose-colored, like, he would have understood. He maybe would have been freaking out as much as my mom and thought I was an alien. I don't know. But that's neither here nor there. But he was my house was compassion oriented, so like obsessed with liberal values, and those are the best values, and it's all about like compassion and care for others and care for community. So of course that's where my mom's sort of question of me came from. But it was like suddenly I must not any longer have those values.
Right.
That is truly how it felt. And like,
because you were a different person. You'd been brainwashed. You were part of a cult, probably. You ate babies. Wasn't that a thing for a while?
Oh, certainly.
I mean, I do eat babies, but that's separate. Maddie, I'm coming for you.
Does love a good baby foot. A little wrist wrinkle. But yeah, and it was like, that was where I was so resentful of the fact that all of these liberal voices got so fucking mean. Just plain fucking mean. Trying to tout that they have the best values on the planet, that their way is the right way, they're the most compassionate and accepting and love-based, and like, no hate lives here. There's a sign on my fucking lawn that's going to say Black Lives Matter. Hate has no home here. Trust the science. Just.
But if you didn't get vaccinated, I hate you for making this go on longer. Question 2. Was this around the time when they kicked Trump off of Twitter?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That happened during
time frame. Okay, then I was remembering that correctly, because I remember a very confusing conversation that is reinforcing the point that you've just made with someone right around that time. And I remember that came up, and I think they just like off the cuff were just like, oh, thank God they got him off of Twitter. And I was like, I actually don't think that was the right call.
Yeah.
And like, don't get me wrong,
it goes without saying, but it doesn't go without saying.
I don't want to hear Trump either. I don't like the guy.
Neither.
I don't think he should be in office. Whatever. Doesn't matter.
Narcissistic megalomaniac. We get it.
Yes. However, because what you mentioned about like, this is the town square, I don't think he should be censored.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that, and my friend said, well, but he's spreading all this misinformation and it's hurting people. And I said, okay, well, aside from the fact that it's Trump and like none of us really want to hear him, what if they decided to censor you? And she said, oh, well, I wouldn't spread misinformation. And I was like, okay, but who then do you think is the decider of what is misinformation? Like, where?
We're just starting to cross a line.
Exactly.
That people aren't realizing.
Right, and that's the problem.
Right. And I remember at the time, too, like, I know people who are terrified of Trump, and that just shows up in avid hatred and sureness that everything out of his mouth is a lie and that he's the worst person that ever existed. Even if that's true, right now he's just
doubt it. Are we forgetting Hitler?
Right. Well, no, he gets compared to Hitler all the time. But like,
I'm out of the loop.
Yeah. No, he's been getting compared to Hitler forever. That's like an old. No, but like
I'm in a hole.
Like right now, he's now being convicted of felonies, and everybody's got these new reasons to be like, no, he's like literally terrible. Like, we can't have him be president. He's literally a felon. Fine. This was before that. This was when he was still just a person who can run for president.
Right.
And the part that all the goddamn democracy-loving humans forgot was that one of the tenets of democracy and freedom was that freedom for democracy is that you do not censor your political opponents, because that brings you towards dictatorship and fascism. You don't censor your opponents. And that's what they were doing, was censoring a political opponent.
Correct. And I think I just wanted to make another point too with regards to like the censorship and shit, which is just that particularly around the whole justification of misinformation or disinformation. Mm-hmm. I just had this hilarious memory of the CDC website and its explanation of the difference of those two things. and the fact that throughout the course of the pandemic, they changed the definition of the word vaccine.
Sure did.
But censorship around mis and disinformation was a bit insulting as well, quite a bit insulting. And it wasn't even that it was happening, it was that people were buying into it. And I think not even like personally insulting, but insulting to people and humanity. Correct. And their intelligence and their gut feelings.
1,000%. And that's where it becomes governmental control.
Right.
Because you're trying to control the population and absolutely pit them against one another and teach us that we can't trust each other. And therefore, I can't even trust myself to make a decision. I need my government to tell me what to do.
Right. And it's like, what is it from? Sorry to interrupt.
No.
Is it from Jurassic Park, maybe? Not Jeff Goldblum. Or Samuel L. Jackson. Somebody else, or maybe it's a different movie. I might be totally wrong. But when they're like, oh no, wait, maybe it's from Independence Day. I don't fucking remember. Okay. I'm making a movie reference.
Try it. Maybe I'll know what movie. Okay, I'm gonna have to hear the reference. No, I'm just kidding.
I've done it backwards. Something to the effect of, a person is smart. People are stupid.
Say more.
People acting in herd mob mentality.
Oh, got it.
What fucking movie is that from? It doesn't matter. The point, though, is that I feel that the truth is, if nothing had been censored and everyone had been allowed to
speak freely,
think freely, have open conversations with the people around them, I believe that individuals would have been able to reach decisions that were more aligned with what was best for them. Mm-hmm. And then as a collective, everyone would be individually making a decision that would be best for them, both in terms of the vaccine, in terms of their life, in terms of, what influence or action they were able and interested to take politically, and whatever you said, as far as like regulations or whatever that was. Policy shit. That would have happened, but it just seemed like the interest was in blanket information, blanket rules, blanket narrative, which was a whole motive behind the censorship, most likely, to ensure that the dumbest possible option was what was
distributed.
Yeah. And followed without question.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. It really, 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 really.
I know, we gotta do more episodes on this, because
totally.
I am like, it is literally a trip down memory lane for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've needed it. That's why I've wanted us to do it on here, just to process. It's not that I'm still harboring deep resentment. I don't think about it. I do, in fact, really care about my community. And I really think it affected everyone. And I still think it's affecting people. And I know that I'm one of those people.
Absolutely.
And that interacting with people, I want to understand that that's affecting them too. And also, it genuinely damaged so many relationships.
I lost most of my friends.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know you would say most.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, because I really lost touch with the big community.
Fascinating.
That I was part of.
Sure. No, I just didn't realize you would say most. Yeah, no, I knew you lost a lot of friends.
Yeah, I lost touch with a lot of people. I didn't have any, I don't think I really had any big blow-ups. There are friends that I am still very close to, and we were very much at odds, and it was very tense, and it was touch and go in those relationships. And since then, in an unspoken way, we've just sort of agreed to not go back to that.
Right.
No, but I had a big support community that I was really involved with. I lost most of those people.
Right.
And yeah, there's one particular instance where, as things sort of had started to normalize, I was with a handful of them, and at the time it felt safe in that intimate group to disclose that I wasn't vaccinated. And a couple of them, like, physically shuddered and pulled back and acted afraid. And there was no repairing those relationships in the aftermath.
Whoa.
Yeah,
it's wild. Families got, like, torn apart. I swear. Anybody who watches Sister Wives? No, literally that family got torn apart through COVID. You and I have talked about this. It can't just be that it was just COVID did it. There were existing things that COVID brought out. And sometimes it was just straight up COVID. Like, you know, it was just the misalignment and the inability, like we were saying, to be curious and to just lead with love and to, like, this happened to me, like, at best, like, with some of my people, we just distanced the whole time and then sort of came back together afterwards.
And you don't mean physically distanced.
No, I mean emotionally, because we were already at a distance. I see what you're saying. I thought you really were joking. Like, I thought you were making, like, a tongue-in-cheek joke, like, and you don't mean 6 feet.
You know what? Just take it both ways.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, like, our relationship. We weren't seeing each other anyway because I wasn't, you know,
and also just weren't
they weren't going to see me, but our relationships became distant for years, and then, like, we've come back together, and it's not just one person, it's several people and family, but then now it's sort of has not been much spoken about. Some have, and that's great, and, like, we can move on. I don't need to, like, definitely hash it out with every person, but I'm just saying, like, at best, you kind of distanced and then came back and kind of just agreed to disagree or agreed to not go back to it. And at worst, yeah, people literally, I definitely, you know, a friend definitely I lost. We just stopped, you know, we couldn't be friends, I guess. We aren't friends anymore. And I just saw it so much where it was just like, that's what it felt not right about the way it was handled too. For that to be the repercussion, because I'll say this and we can wrap up soon, but, like, I told you, like, I went to Ohio recently with my friend to see the eclipse, and I was talking to her aunt, who is politically active in her town and had been the mayor at some point in the town, and she was really curious, and so she's in a very red county that's, like, super Trump supporting, and she hates Trump, and she, I think, was, like, curious. She wanted to ask me some questions. I don't remember what prompted me to tell her, but I just knew it was the only answer I could give to whatever question she asked. And all of a sudden I was like, I guess I'm doing this because I'm still practicing.
You're so gun shy.
I'm so gun shy. Like, oh my God, the amount of times if I ever told people, I mean, yeah, we got literal recoiling terror.
People flinched.
Literal flinching in my face.
And then never spoke to us honestly again.
No, truly.
Yeah. And I will say too, like, when I mentioned before that I lost most of my friends, it wasn't like, you know, there was a blow up or they told me off or they even respectfully said, we disagree and I think we should be distant now. I don't want our relationship to go through turmoil. They just did a pretty quick fade out.
Yeah, totally. Didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then to me, I mean, and that's fine. And those actually never came up for me as resentments because it was like, you are where you are and I am where I am. And we do not align anymore based very clearly on the way that was handled.
Right.
And I love you from afar.
Right. But so this aunt was like, basically I ended up being like, well, I didn't get vaccinated during the pandemic, and so that really affected me. And she got really curious, and it was interesting because she was in a situation where she got the reverse, which I love. Yeah, that this is also true. We haven't talked about it because it wasn't our experience, but we both, you and I, deeply, openly acknowledge we know that this happened, that some people in parts of the country got shamed for getting vaccinated.
Absolutely.
1,000%. That's why this shit was so bonkers.
Absolutely.
And she was in a part of the country that happened, where she was shamed a couple times for having gotten vaccinated.
Good Lord. And like, what does this tell us, kids?
It's all insane. I know, right? Like, all of it's bullshit. Like, what? So it's really just we're being told to shame one another. That's all that shows me. And we were having this really interesting conversation. She was really curious. And it was really interesting, too, because at one point she was like, so what do you think the political leaders should have done? And I'm like, I don't know. Not that.
Here's what I think they should have done.
Sure.
Just this one point.
Sure.
Which is like the snake eating its own tail. I think they should have said, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. No, and that's always been a big flaw in our political system. And,
right.
And I
understand that would be scary, but it would also be honest and lay a foundation for trust and collaboration and more voices to be heard.
Right.
Yeah, and that goes back to like the one big resentment that I did have, where it was just like, I just want everyone to honestly say, I don't know, and then let's fucking talk about it. But
absolutely.
Anyway, that's all that's the only political advice I have as a political official and a medical doctor, as we noted previously.
But she was like asking me that, and I was like, I don't know. I just think that there was, all this fear that was drummed up and all this and that. And then she kept just being like, yeah, but like they needed to do those things to keep people safe. That's like government leaders' role, is to keep people safe. And they were doing what they could to like keep as many people safe as they could, et cetera, et cetera. And she was really like holding tight to that. And I was like, okay, I understand. And also there was a lot of negative repercussions to the way that it was handled and the messaging that was being used, et cetera. But long story short, I then on my own realized and came to and said to her, I was like, listen, like, I think that the main sadness that I feel for all of us and the way that it was handled was that we didn't have a chance to grieve what was going to happen no matter what. And I told her, the one thing I said to her that stopped her in her tracks, I was like, no matter what, a lot of people were going to die. No matter what.
Yep.
And it was like that disconnect from science and spirituality was so prevalent during this pandemic, of like, you trust the science, it's black and white, you listen to a scientist. When you talk to true scientists, they are so against censorship because science isn't black and white. There isn't one right answer. It's a bunch of scientists, their voices getting together, talking about their own opinions about a study, and then coming to a consensus
about the best guess at the present moment, given the information we've received up until this point.
Yes, and given the patient in front of them individually.
Right. And the acknowledgement that this will evolve. This is the best we can do right now.
But it's many voices coming together. It is not one voice saying, I am science. My name is Anthony Science Fauci. And you do what I say because I have the science.
What was that thing he said about, like, if you don't agree with me, you don't believe in science?
He said that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did I get it? He said,
I don't remember it.
But totally. He equated himself to science.
Right.
But that's my biggest takeaway.
So cute.
Was that what? Who said
that? That's so cute.
That's so cute. I am science. But yeah, that was my biggest takeaway. It was just like, people were going to die no matter what. Oh, the science spirituality thing. We live on a planet. We live with viruses. We live a place where pandemics happen. I'm not saying we can't use human ingenuity and force and will to devise ways to use science to help us, aka a vaccine or something like that, something medicinal to help, sure. But they're still going to happen, and a lot of people are going to die no matter what. And as it went on, the government wanted to control and control and control so much harder, they weren't even acknowledging. It was as though we could figure out a way for no one to die.
Right, because the other thing I was going to say, and this is probably for like part 16 of this conversation, but just the immense fear of death. That was further cultivated.
Absolutely.
Throughout this whole thing.
Absolutely. And that is like a cultural thing that needed to come up for all of us. But it came out in high relief of how
It
scared
was
we are.
weaponized.
Yeah, it was weaponized against us and how scared we are of death. And I understand that. I am scared of death sometimes, and I also understand many cultures across the planet deal with death very differently than Americans do.
Right.
And have a different understanding of it or a different piece with it. And it was weaponized against us, and we weren't able to like grieve the fact that a lot of people were going to die. No matter what, no one could do right or wrong. No one did anything wrong. The fact that a lot of people died.
Right.
And I think it was always going to die.
It was, no, I agree with you, and I actually haven't thought about that in a long time, but for anyone that lost anyone, I don't care how close or far they were from you, like, extract that experience from the pandemic, and there was a due grief process that everyone deserves to have. And then I know that there were a great many people who lost a ton of people in their life, and all of that got crowded out by just the fuckery of the situation, how it was handled, and all these like weird narratives and the conspiracies and the political
and the ripping each other away from each other. Our communities got ripped away from us. We got pitted against each other
and all that. And yeah, I love that you made that point. I really hadn't thought about that in a while. Well, to elaborate on that too, it's like grieving the people that died from COVID, grieving the people that were dying anyway, that then COVID got in the way, grieving relationships that were lost, grieving businesses that were lost, plans that were lost.
The amount of canceled weddings.
Right.
Truly, yeah, like
all those things.
Absolutely. And I think that got shoved away to a place where that's still something I think we're going to have to reckon with. I don't think we've gotten to grieve.
Oh, no. I think we're just getting to the point, because earlier when you said people are still healing from it, yes, and I think that people are just now getting to the point where they're recognizing that the world, again, looks very similarly as far as daily activities, but I feel different inside, and it's not because things look different on the outside. I think people are just now starting to realize that
there was a fundamental shift,
that they have things to grieve about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so it would be so awesome if we could just, I mean, always like just be extra compassionate with each other, please, but fantasy idea, let's shut the world down and let everyone grieve for a year and just like love on each other.
Totally. And be allowed to see each other in the process.
Oh my God, yeah. Mandatory.
Mandatory. Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. And I think that will be the next few years. I think it's...
I hope so, because man, that shit's lit. No, painful as fuck, but worth it.
No, but I absolutely know it's coming. The next 10 years, there's going to be a lot more conversation because all of that stuff has calmed down. There already are. And there's not that censorship anymore. I mean, there is.
Oh man, I'm not going to look, but I am a little curious. Did that just happen?
I don't know when.
Oh boy. It's off though?
Uh-huh. Oh my God.
It's okay. We still got that, right?
Yep.
All right.
This has been so real. Thank you for going.
It got too real for the GoPro. I guess we'll wrap up, y'all, but
too real for the GoPro.
Our camera just quit, obviously.
And I'm freaked the fuck out.
SIAG.
I know it is, but...
Okay, so we're definitely going to do another episode at some point. Maybe for the next one.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of other stuff that we wanted to say. And... for anyone that's like clutching their pearls, I thought I could trust you. I thought you weren't wackadoodle. Please go back and listen to the episode because you weren't paying attention.
I thought you weren't wackadoodle.
No,
I mean, wackadoodle, just in different ways.
Totally different way.
Oh, yeah. Love you all.
Vigorously waving at the moon.
Does Maria every time she sees it.
Okay. All right. Love you guys so much.
So much. Thank you for listening.
Like, subscribe, follow, all that shit. Please just share.
Share.
Okay. Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and most importantly, share. This episode was hosted by Maria and Maria. Theme music composed and performed by Maria. Logo design by Maria. Recorded and produced by Maria. Snacks provided by Maria. Moral support provided to Maria by Maria.